Voicing the Virgin, Casolani and Italian Baroque sacred music. This is part of our unit on sacred choral music. And here we are in the Baroque between 1600 and 1750. The Baroque is an invention of opera. And although the piece we're going to listen to by Casolani is certainly influenced by the style of the opera, her music is not an opera, it's sacred music. So music has often been a means through which marginalized individuals and groups can express their perspective to the broader society. So what is marginalized individuals? And we could say that this is the main part of the page, and this is the margin over here. So a marginalized individual would be somebody that's not part of the mainstream, but on the margins. And who was that in this case? Well, women in the 17th century, Italian convents were dedicated to singing as an integral part of their role as spiritual servants and advocates. Singing a prayer was more meaningful as rather than just saying the prayer. And that was the rule of thumb. So Italian convents were like monasteries for men, and with a lot of praying. Of course, as a religious thing, you had to be a nun, right? Nuns adapted standard vocal music scorings to their needs by transposing parts and adding instruments. Well, no men are involved with the singing or any music performances from the convents. So they're writing music for soprano, alto, tenor, bass. You could have women that did have low enough voices to sing the tenor part. We still to this day have that, but women don't have the capabilities of singing a bass part. So those parts were often transposed up an octave or played on an instrument. And this nun here, Chiara Margherita Casolani, a Benedictine nun who was a musician and composer, was one of a few whose works were published and circulated beyond the convent. Her Magnificat exemplifies both a common genre and an individual approach to text setting. And we're going to sample her piece of music called the Magnificat, although she wrote two of those. So her music was circulated beyond the convent. Well, with printing and published music, and I don't know how that was arranged, but there were few copyright laws at the time. So I guess you could make money selling one copy at a time and keeping the profit. Nuns, a nun's life in Baroque Italy. Well, in life in general, there were a few possibilities for creative women. What would you do if you wanted to have a career? You couldn't go to college, so basically you could get married or join a convent. And at this time, 1650, opera was very popular. It got popular extremely fast, invented in 1600. And men and women were performers, actors, singers in opera. And immediately there was a character and morality often in question for women that were in theater work. And, I'm not going to let my daughter do that. My wife can't do that. And if you did, then there was suspicion of something that was beneath the highest order of character. Anyway, and in convents, it was more or less a secret world, right? What went on behind the doors was mostly praying, but different convents would focus on different activities that would be creative. again, women had a choice of getting married and perhaps being pregnant for 20 years, and giving birth was a very dangerous thing to do. Many women died giving childbirth, and as well, many of the births were not successful, and children died before age 5. King had a wife, and she was pregnant for 20 years and 20 times, and none of the children ever lived past like 5 years old. So the name of the convent is Saint Radegonda, named after Saint Radegonda, and it's in Milan. And the nuns would perform for dignitaries. Here is a painting from 1688. Well, the artist between 1688 and 1767. So there's not too much time after the time that Casolani would have been writing music in a convent. Imagine working for a church like this that the convent was associated with. And, you can see the nuns perfectly standing in order and spaced apart. It's curious why these nuns only have white on. They don't have the black headdress. I don't know what that means, but it's kind of spooky stuff. And definitely the whole character is Middle Ages, although this is in the Baroque already. Chiara Margherita Casolani, 1602, 1676. So opera is invented in 1600, the beginning of the Baroque period. So she was a nun and a composer. She was the youngest daughter of a wealthy Milanese merchant. Would you send your daughter to a convent? Maybe, if she wanted to. So she took religious vows at age 18 to become a nun, and became the choir director, a composer, very successful, must have been one talented lady. And we're going to listen to her music. It's just pretty spectacular. So she wrote 3 collections of published music, 1 collection of vespers. Vesper is a Latin word which means basically evening. Vespers are music that are performed in the evening. And she wrote motets. Remember, we sampled a motet by Josquin. Okay, take note of this sculpture because it's Baroque and it's very busy and florid. This is typical of that style, right? So in here it says, in the ecstasy of Saint Teresa, which is the name of this sculpture, Bernini, the sculpturist, the nun experiences both extreme pain from the sword of the angel and through divine intervention, a great love of God. Well, what is a Magnificat? A Magnificat is a canticle. Okay, what is a canticle? A canticle is a hymn. A hymn is a song that's involves praise. So a canticle is a hymn, chant, or other song of praise taken from biblical or holy texts and regularly used in church services. But a Magnificat is a certain type of a canticle used in the Christian liturgy, especially at Vespers, an evening song, the text being the hymn of the Virgin Mary. Again, you can't go wrong writing music about the Virgin Mary or a poem. The Magnificat the text is from the Gospel of Luke, from the Bible. She wrote 2 Magnificats, and both of them are polychoral settings. You have 2 choirs. Can you imagine being in a church like that and having a choir on the left and a choir on the right with soloists? I don't know, maybe they were in the middle, and an organ that would play. So this must have been wonderful stereo. There's contrasts in performance groups, right? One choir, the other choir, and the textures and the timbre. Only by nuns, no men involved. Painting from the Middle Ages, sorry, notice how flat it is and very, very little, if any, perspective. And what is this? But she works at St. Radaganda, and here it is, Radaganda withdrawing to the monastery from the 11th century manuscript of the life of St. Radaganda. This is the name of the convent where she worked. She would have been 48 years old when this was published, right? 2 choirs, 4 voices each with an organ continuo. Continuo is a word from the Baroque period, 1600, 1750, and it's usually more than one person. Basically, the music parts are a bass part, and it could be a string instrument, or it could be a wind instrument and a chordal instrument, like a lute, or something that would play chords like keyboard, harpsichord, or an organ could do both, because you can play the bass line with your feet and then the chord part. And it's not just playing chords, it's a certain stylistic way of interpreting the chords, but it's an accompaniment. The continuo is a rhythm group or an accompaniment music element. So the organ would be by itself. And in this piece of music, notice that the sections quickly change from one to another, the timbre, from a large ensemble to smaller ensemble soloists. And you'll notice that it goes from duple to triple meter, right? 1 2 1 2 1 2, or 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, and the tempos change. There are no men, so the sound is very pure to my ears and serene in a way. Very effective music, and it's like the example was over 9 minutes. So get your mind right and get ready to listen for 9 minutes. Try and identify parts that are polyphonic, parts that are homophonic or homorhythmic, and the changes in the tempo and the changes in the meter. In the text, right, it refers, in Casolani's inspired work, virtuosic duets interrupt the larger choral forces that sing in homophony. What is that? Basically one melody, and everything else is to support that one melody. And text and music are freely repeated in a highly expressive setting, rich in word painting that is at once spiritual and sensual, like the sculpture we have seen. So let's listen to the music.
Avrocin,